You are listening to the Why Smart Women podcast, the podcast that helps smart women work out why we repeatedly make the wrong decisions and how to make better ones. From relationships, career choices, finances, to faux fur jackets and kale smoothies. Every moment of every day, we're making decisions. Let's make them good ones. I'm your host, Annie McCubbin, and as a woman of a certain age, I've made my own share of really bad decisions. Not my husband. I don't mean him, though. I did go through some shockers to find him. And I wish this podcast had been around to save me from myself. This podcast will give you insights into the working of your own brain, which will blow your mind. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm recording, and you are listening on this day. Always was, always will be, Aboriginal land.
Well, hello, smart women, and welcome to the Smart Women podcast. Yes, indeed, this is not the voice of Annie McCubbin. The voice of Annie McCubbin is compromised. She's got a fairly shocking case of asthma at the moment and doesn't have a lot of air, but is determined to read a little piece that she penned in celebration of International Women's Day, which just recently passed. In celebration of? I'm not quite sure it's celebratory, but she read it to me last night, and I think it's really good writing, and we hope that you really enjoy it. I know that Annie usually tells you about the weather. It's dark, it's cold, it's a rainy evening here in Dee Why on Sydney's northern beaches, but we are warmed by each other's company, and I really hope you enjoy this little piece from Annie. She's under strict instructions to say no more than is absolutely necessary. Let's see how she goes.
Thank you, David. That's a nice cough.
For authenticity.
Just for authenticity, yeah. My voice is a bit crap, but I'm going to give it my best shot. Okay. Yeah, okay, alrighty. So this is called A Day in the Life of a Working Woman on International Women's Day. We are recording, aren't we, David?
I believe so.
That's very good.
I mean, if people are listening to it now, we probably
Were,
yeah.
I've had to leave David in charge of things. Actually, that's so unfair because he's the one that has all the technical skill, and as we know, I'm pretty useless. But anyway, here we go. So you're in a meeting and you proffer a well-thought-out idea which is totally ignored. Then Adam from finance repeats it and everyone's like, yeah, Adam's the man. And you sit in the meeting berating yourself for not applying the principles you learned in the communication workshop. At the time, holding your ground seemed so attainable when the perky woman in the slingbacks and cerise pants suit explained the difference between aggression and assertiveness. So you take a big breath, which I can't at the moment, essential for assertiveness, and say, yeah, well, I mentioned Adam's point about a minute ago, but your voice sounds shrill and querulous and gives out halfway through the sentence like a teenage boy. And newfound respect does not cross the faces of your colleagues. They're just confused and faintly embarrassed on your behalf. And when you report this disastrous attempt at finding your voice to your friend Justine, she looks at you pityingly and says, you're just paranoid, but what does she know? She's one of those rare women who commands attention and thinks women should just throw their shoulders back and get on with it. And you go back to your hot desk and ruminate on Adam plagiarising your idea and work up a couple of alternate scenarios which include you standing up at the meeting and saying, that was my idea, you dick. Then you go home and your husband has picked your holiday destination and you sign your son's permission slip to go to a school excursion in Indonesia where boys will be immersed in a third world culture and learn empathy and self-sufficiency. And you find the whole thing reeks of middle-class colonialism, but you sign anyway. And you open your bag and retrieve the book called Bravery, which Amy had given you because she found it inspiring. Then you want to throw it at the wall, and your husband asks you if you've seen the HDMI cable which he left on the table and which is vital for his presentation he's giving tomorrow. No, not that one. It's got a different end on it, and you go to ask why. If it was so important, was it left on the table among the school permission slips, the discarded Amazon delivery box, and his abandoned gym towel and goggles. Then he makes a comment about how you should enter your receipts into the family budget sheet, which you know you should push back on. But honestly, what's the point? And your daughter narrows her eyes at you and you think you should be a better role model for her, but you're distracted by the packet of Doritos she's consuming 20 minutes before dinner time, and you go to say something but then don't, and instead congratulate yourself that you've raised a daughter without an eating disorder. And your father rings and asks what night does his blue bin go out, and you say, Tuesday, Dad, it's always Tuesday. So you, So you pour yourself a glass of Chardonnay, though it's no alcohol Monday, and wonder why it all feels so hard, and you can't just grab the assertiveness thing by the horns and ride it into your next meeting. Why you can't best Adam at his own game and tell your son to take the bin out and be nice to his sister before you spend $15,000 sending him to Indonesia. Why you can't say to your daughter, if you're going to eat Doritos, at least have the good manners to offer me one. And say to your husband, you're the one that doesn't put the seat. You're the one that actually doesn't lodge the receipts, not me. And I don't like skiing, nor do I want to go away with Gary, who makes stupid sexist comments at me, and which he expects I'll laugh at, and which I do, and then hate myself for. So, what are we going to do about all this? This stress, this melee of work and children and husbands and parents. Is yoga the key? I mean, do we want to listen to another soft-voiced practitioner telling us to let it go and come into the present? Maybe we don't like the present because no one listens to us. We can de-stress ourselves lying on yoga mats until we're limp as noodles, and then maybe when we emerge back into the world outside, we'll be slightly better equipped to deal with it. But really? Is that the answer? Probably not. Look, generally speaking, and apologies to the parents who have bucked the norm, but we're raised to be nice and compliant while our male counterparts are raised to be tough and competitive. So while we wait for the patriarchy to realise that power sharing would actually mean genuine innovation, more productivity and less pointless wars, while we still operate in a culture that tolerates a 21.1% pay gap that's here in Australia, while casual sexism is shrugged off, and while cognitive dissonance means that if we see the word leader, our brains serve us up a picture of a white, middle-aged man, we are certainly hard up against it. So the call to arms is lean in, hold your ground and be assertive. But the how we do it is very, very unclear. None of us are rational. We're run by unseen biases driving our thinking and by dint our behaviour. Critical thinking comes naturally to precisely no one, but it's essential learning if we want to turn the cultural habits around. Good men would have a better chance at not letting sexist comments pass if they understood the brain bias that stops them. Leaders would make less gendered decisions if they understood how the similarity bias tugs at their cortex. And women would be more likely to be aware of their particular flavour of backing away from uncomfortable moments if they understood the role of their limbic system. We are so good at convincing ourselves that to speak up would be seen as a provocation. And nice girls, we don't provoke. We need tools so we can work out why, in any specific moment, we resile and revert to silence. We need guidance to identify what habits we have fallen into that may not serve us, but feel comfortable and familiar. We are not silent by choice, we're conditioned. We can't fix our culture, but we can nudge it along a little by finding moments where we find it in ourselves to put the story straight. But please, don't tell me to relax and heal. I'm not broken. The system is.
Okay, wow, that is terrific writing, Annie. Not another word, okay? You can now go sit on the couch and I will take it from here. I think that Dr. Jack would probably be pretty cross that I even let you do that. So you sit down and let me continue. Yeah, what a great piece. The sentiment's not terribly encouraging, but I think it's better to call a spade a spade. It's only when we acknowledge an uncomfortable truth that we can take steps in the right direction and and stop wasting time and putting the responsibility for change on people who are not the ones who are creating that dynamic in the first place. Hey, listen, if you're new to the podcast, I should introduce myself. My name is David McCubbin. Yes, we do share a surname. I am indeed Annie's husband. I was going to say better half, but I don't think that's true, and nor do I think it's appropriate, although I think my mate Martin Bella would would disagree. Martin, if you're listening to this, thank you for your support. Hey, actually, when Annie read the chapter to me last night, she gave me a warning beforehand. She said, "Don't worry, darling. I'm not actually referring to you in this." And then she read it, and I thought, "Yeah, right." Notwithstanding the fictional elements of that little story, I am the only one in this house who ever asks about the location of a missing HDMI cable. So, yes, it's always a bit challenging when your partner sees you as part of the gendered problem. But we don't need to go into that right now because I've got a little story to tell myself. So I've got a new job, which means I have to travel into the CBD every day. And last week, I made the mistake of hopping on a very full bus, which meant I had to stand for the entire journey. Now, that was uncomfortable. I've got a bit of pain in my knees, whether that's football or a recent skiing trip or whether it's just the numbers on my birth certificate. I don't know, but there you go. I would have preferred a seat. And that probably inflamed the irritation that I was feeling with what I saw in front of me. I was standing in the aisle, all the seats were occupied, and in the back row, I don't know if you've noticed the back row of a standard Sydney bus, but essentially it has space for 5 people. Well, those 5 seats were occupied by 3 young men. Their posture, all 3, I think the term is mansplaining. Young professionals, slick haircuts, pressed shirts, nice sports jackets, spread out all over the place. And what you could see it so clearly. You had 2 people sitting next to each other on one side of the aisle and 2 people sitting next to each other on the other side of the aisle, and the aisle space in the middle. And there they were, 3 of them, occupying the whole thing. 2 of them were on their phones. One of them was drifting in and out of sleep. But there they sat, the 3 entitled monkeys, occupying considerably more than their fair share of the available space. And it wasn't just my inflamed knee that got me cranky about this situation. Between myself and Muppets 1, 2 and 3 were 3 women standing in the aisle. Now, call me old-fashioned, but I have this thing about standing on public transport when there are women standing. I mean, look, yes, I know it's old-fashioned, but what I can say, it just makes me uncomfortable. What was really clear to me was that our 3 young gentlemen, strapping young chaps that they were, they seemed intent on ignoring that dynamic entirely, thereby making it entirely unnecessary for them to give up their seats, God forbid, or even at the barest minimum, make space so that some of their fellow passengers, male or female, could also enjoy the benefit of having somewhere to sit. I mean, this is a 45-minute bus ride. Had I been a little closer, I would have been sorely tempted to tell these boys what I was thinking. It's not just the gendered convention of chivalry and generosity here. They were clearly, healthy young men, strapping young specimens who would have ridden out that journey with considerably less discomfort than any of their fellow passengers. Or, as I'll say again, if they just kind of squeezed themselves up a little bit, there would have been room for at least 2 more people to sit down. Well, I didn't say anything, partly because they were too far away from me to be nuanced about it, and partly because I know that if I had inflamed the situation, none of the other passengers would have thanked me for creating drama on a crowded bus. So instead, I did my best, Grace Tame, resorted to side-eyeing them and occasionally shaking my head as I sighed. Now, this little episode happened just a couple of days after the results of the latest gender pay gap survey were released, revealing, yet again, the glacial rate of progress towards what most reasonable people agree is the goal: equal pay for equal work. Now, no doubt, there continues to be a good deal of inquiry as to why it's so hard to shift the dial in any meaningful way. I remember a figure that was released in 2021. At the current rate of progress at that time, it would take another 101 years for Australian women to achieve pay equity. Well, 5 years have passed. So what's that now? 96 years? The wait's almost over. Oh, I mean, seriously, fair income. What has got to shift? And I looked at those boys, and it occurred to me that their poor behaviour has a pretty simple root cause that I think is part of the problem with the slow rate of progress towards gender pay equity, and that is entitlement. For whatever reason, they felt entitled to take up more than their fair share on that bus. And why was that? Was it simply because they'd been on the bus longer than anyone else? Maybe they got up earlier. Maybe they lived further away from the city. Whatever it was, they had taken their position, possession being 9/10 of the law, and as far as they were concerned, case closed. They were entitled to more than their fair share, and they seemed incapable of seeing beyond that. Sound familiar? Look, I know that my message in telling this story really should be directed towards the brotherhood. Sorry, I haven't found the time to write the piece and post my whiny little commentary on the disappointing behaviour of my brothers. Maybe I will get around to it. Annie's conclusion to her story saved me from the suggestion about how I can fix myself. It's not me that's broken, it's the system. My addition to her insight, what has found its way onto the back of that system. Sorry, let me say that again. What has found its way onto the back seat of that system is entitlement. And if you look, you'll see it everywhere. From Sydney Public Transport to the leadership teams of some organisations to the leader of the free world, a creature whose many utterances in recent months boasts about what he is entitled to do. And he's acting on it. There's an age-old tactic: make war abroad to keep peace at home. If you can distract, you can silence your citizens by waging war in foreign lands. It comes up again and again in Henry V, in King John. It's not a terribly sophisticated strategy, but somehow these characters get away with it again and again. And yes, indeed, they are men. That kind of entitlement leads clear as day to the abuse of power, to crimes against humanity, to the ruin of human lives, men, women, and children. And frankly, it turns my stomach. One only hopes that they get their comeuppance. The English poet Percy Shelley believed that arrogant power does not last. You might know these words. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. Yep, Ozymandias, 1818. History tells us that despots and their legacies do not last. And back to the boys on the bus. I seriously believe if they don't get over themselves, if they don't learn to put other people before themselves, then I don't imagine they'll experience the true joy of an intimate relationship, a loving relationship that lasts. So indulge me just with a little bit of Shakespeare. Sonnet 116. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediment. Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever-fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose worth's unknown, although his height be taken. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and winks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. If this be error, and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved. Yeah, I reckon good things come to those who give up their seat on the bus, who give up their ownership of the boardroom, who make space for others. I don't think men have a mortgage on behaviour that comes from a sense of entitlement. But to deny the fact that men are still the bigger money earners and the majority, if not the sole occupants, of many boards and leadership teams and war cabinets, to deny that is to be willful, selective, seeing it not, hearing it not, and certainly speaking it not. That's my little piece. I hope I've managed to thread the fine line between virtue signalling and mansplaining, and I hope I've given you something to think about and enjoy a little bit of Shakespeare on the way. And what the heck, what do you expect for nothing? Listen, thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. I promise Annie will be back to her full glory in the next episode. And until then, stay safe, stay well, and keep your critical thinking hats on. See you later.
Thanks for tuning into Why Smart Women with me, Annie McCubbin. I hope today's episode has ignited your curiosity and left you feeling inspired by my anti-motivational style. Join me next time as we continue to unravel the fascinating layers of our brains and develop ways to sort out the fact from the fiction and the over 6,000 thoughts we have in the course of every day. Remember, intelligence isn't enough. You can be as smart as paint, but it's not just about what you know, it's about how you think. And in all this talk of whether or not you can trust your gut, if you ever feel unsafe, whether it's in the street, at work, in a car park, in a bar, or in your own home, please respect that gut feeling. Staying safe needs to be our primary objective. We can build better lives, but we have to stay safe to do that. And don't forget to subscribe, rate and review the podcast and share it with your fellow smart women and allies. Together, we're hopefully reshaping the narrative around women and making better decisions. So until next time, stay sharp, stay savvy, and keep your critical thinking hat shiny. This is Annie McCubbin signing off from Why Smart Women. See you later. This episode was produced by Harrison Hess. It was executive produced and written by me, Annie McCubbin.